I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience. I'm just trying to get my live feed going, so appreciate help there. And I'm your Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeehan, and welcome to the second weekly session of Capital Clarity. And if I may just restate the purpose of what this is all about, is basically threefold. First of all, we want to help the citizens of Idaho get a better understanding of the process that happens here in your capital. Secondly, we want to help you understand how to read language, how to find language, how to track language that's working its way through the system. And then thirdly, we want to help you understand how to effectively communicate to your legislator as they have begun debating some issues that are very important to all of you and to the people of Idaho. So that is our purpose for being here today, and it looks like we have a good crowd again today. After last week, and we had it filmed, between those that showed up to testify or listen and those that watched online, we reached out to over 800 people. So that's a great start for a first time. And I just encourage you to share the link, share the message, share the word with your friends. If you can't be here every Thursday at noon to personally participate, then it'll be available on my Lieutenant Governor Facebook page, and then I believe Representative Moon also is live streaming it on her Facebook page. So. And again, thank you to Josh for helping to film this and Dustin for helping us with technical issues. So today before I turn over to Representative Moon, and are you going to step through the website again, Representative Moon?
The first item on finding who your
yes,
are.
Yes.
I'll be going through that, but that will be on
Okay.
the Institute.
Okay, so Representative Moon will show you how to easily find out who your legislator is, where you live. And then we're also going to show you some tricks on how to track legislation. And I've discussed this with some people in the past that once things really start moving and happening fast, it's really hard, even for us here in the building, to track where is this bill at? Is it in committee? Was it introduced? Is it being debated on the floor? So we're going to show you how to get back onto that legislative website and subscribe to the committee that you're interested in, or perhaps all committees in both the Senate and the House. And by public records law, then they are required, if you subscribe to that committee, they're required that every time an announcement for an agenda or a public hearing, then you will get a notification on that. So it's hard, even, as I said, for even those of us that are here trying to track things, because things just start happening very fast. But this is a way that will help you as citizens understand what's happening down here. And so I'm going to just turn my time over to Representative Moon, and she'll help show you some of those things on the website. The House is still debating on a bill, a constitutional amendment today. That's not one of the things that's on our agenda. But she and I will cover until perhaps the other members of the legislature that express an interest to be here are able to show up. But this is sometimes what we deal with during this legislative process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Moon.
Thank you. Is that loud enough? Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and it's nice to see some faces I've been meeting with over the past week, so I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad to see this turnout, and hopefully we'll have these seats filled on next week's episode of Capital Clarity. On the agenda today that you saw online, Representative Greg Cheney, he's the chairman of our Jude and Rules on the House side. He was going to speak to you about the status of House Resolution 64. He's not in committee right now, but he had a family emergency he had to leave for. I did leave the committee, but I did do something called a pair slip. So we're voting on an amendment, and amendments are a little tough. Sometimes you're not aware, but things should maybe be taken care of in statute, in law, instead of an amendment. So you'll see how in a reflective vote of the crowd, most of it, it's got to have a 2/3 vote, and we'll see if it passes. But there's still time to get it into everybody's hands that we can meet and call ourselves back into session, but we also want to do it the right way. That's all I'll say at that point, and maybe this will be an issue we will discuss next week. Constitutional amendments are tough. They're tough. And law is how we can easily address things. So with that little tidbit and enticing you to be here next week, the issue that Representative Cheney was going to talk to you about was House Rule 64. And a lot of you have already contacted and reached out to your legislators, and you've let them know that you have questions about House Rule 64. And what this would have done, and I'll just share that with you for those of you who don't know what it is, this is a rule on how the House runs their meetings, how we run our committee meetings, how we run the floor, all of the area that is overseen, and more or less the Speaker of the House is the one in control of these open areas. And so these rules, they were rather lengthy, and I really do wish Representative Cheney was here, but he was the person who was carrying it on the House side. So everybody has a bill sponsor. Now, he has stated that it wasn't really his bill, but it was given to him by law enforcement to ratchet down some of the rules that are just kind of traditional that we have here in the Capitol as being opposed to actual hard-pressed rule. So what Rule 64 would have done, that the Speaker would oversee, this would have been the added language, decorum and preserve order in the House chamber, lobby, and gallery. Any persons disrupting the decorum of the House and the ability of the House to perform its duties while on the House floor shall be subject to removal from these spaces at the direction of the Speaker. And then in case of disturbance, disorderly contact, or breach of decorum in a committee meeting room, a committee chairman shall have the power to order the same to be cleared. But then we got into some freedom of speech issues. So banners, placards, T-shirts, signage, things were starting to come into question. Anyway, this was going to put down things like disruptions, as much as like even clapping or yelling. You could be pulled out of a chamber with those kind of actions. And another issue that many of you wrote about was the fact that we could now inspect bags, diaper bags, computer bags, just on the fact if they think there's something in there. Okay, you guys, that's something that a lot of you told your legislators that this is your house and you want to be able to come in freely and exercise all of your constitutional rights while voting your concerns about a bill or a rule change or an amendment to the Constitution. So this is now on hold, and I think that's what Representative Cheney would have shared with you, that we had met up in our caucus room. What we have in the House is what's called a whiteboard session. So they do really have a huge whiteboard where they put up the bill and then go through the language. And we did that, and a lot of folks were commenting that they have heard messages from their constituents or received emails, and they cannot support this. So based on the House members voicing their opinion in the well, it wasn't a caucus meeting, it was a whiteboard session, I think it was pretty obvious that right now this isn't going anywhere. So to those of you who wanted to stop it, you can be proud of the fact that by your involvement, it was probably stopped. That is why this Capitol critique is or clarity is so important, is the fact that you do have influence. You do play a big part in Idaho state government. Maybe you don't feel like so much in national government, but it's we the people. And you are the ones who run this state. And don't you ever forget it. So this is great. So we've all seen this kind of work out this past week. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to talk about is that when we've been meeting with folks, we've noticed that a lot of people don't know who their legislators are. You might know of one of them, but maybe not who your senator is or who your other representative is. Now, I'm District 8, so I'm Seat 8B, and my seatmate is Terry Gestrin, Seat 8A. And then I have a senator in Emmett, and his name is Senator Thane, Stephen Thane. So we're going to go through it a little. Now, as we talk about bills, we're going to throw in some little tutorials so that you can understand how to find out who your legislators are, how to look at a bill, or see how it's progressing through each side of this building. So Dustin is going to pull up. This is something that was made available, and it is right here. You can type in your address. Oh, now, are you on the Madison Institute one?
This is the one that they linked to.
Oh, this is the one they linked to. Perfect. Okay, so let's put in my address. I'm 4575 Jordan Creek Road in the middle of nowhere. I bet they can't find me. I live there for a reason. I don't want anybody to find me.
Is that Stanley?
4575 Jordan Creek Road, Stanley. Even though I'm 45-minute drive from Stanley, that's my address. Let's see if it pops up. He didn't spell Jordan. Oh, well, it's close enough. Okay, so if you see right there, there's the town side of Custer and Bonanza. It's kind of light over there. But you can see, there we are. Representative Moon, Terry Gestrin, and Stephen Thane. Anybody want to know who their legislators are? And Dustin will put your address in.
83651.
83651.
Okay. Is that just the zip
Just a
code?
zip code?
That's a zip code. Oh,
There you go. There you go. So you have Senator Lakey and Representative Bruce Skog and Representative Rick Youngblood. And when you get in the Boise area, it's really tight. So it's good to be able to use this tool to find out what you're looking at. Okay, anybody else? Anybody? We'll take one more if somebody really doesn't know who their legislators are. You're all good? Perfect. Share this tool, and it will be on the website to also use it.
Maybe repeat the Madison Liberty Institute.
Okay, and this was originally sent out on Facebook, so if you have friended me, if you've friended Dorothy Moon for Idaho, you can go onto the Facebook link, and it's through Madison Institute, and it's the same thing, that it has a place where you can put in your address to find out who your legislators are. All right, and then...
Representative Moon, that's on the legislative website.
And this is on the legislative website as well, but they just moved it on to their own Madison Liberty link for some of you who are involved or also on that link as well. Okay? Now, the other thing we're going to do, did you want to?
Subscribing to the emails?
Yes, do you want to take care of that?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
great.
so Dustin, if you'll just go to the committee, go to the committee link, and there's House committees, Senate committees, and in each chamber, there's education, health and welfare, tax. Pick which committee you want to follow, or just go to each committee within each chamber. So let's just pull up, this is House Agriculture Affairs. If you just click on Ag Affairs and see that little third button over, subscribe, right there. If you go down, you just put your name and your email address in right there. And then every time the committee secretary gets ready to put out an agenda for the next day, and so the law says that they have to advertise it 24 hours in advance. Am I correct?
Yes.
With that? So the public disclosure, 24 hours in advance, you will receive a notification, an email, that that committee is going to meet that next day and which bills will be up for a public hearing. Okay? So if you want to follow every committee in the Senate and every committee in the House, you can do it that way. You'll receive lots of emails and you'll have to parse through them. And that is cumbersome, but it probably is the best way for you as the individual citizen to really understand what's going on down here. But if you want to focus on just tax policy or focus on state affairs, you can just go to those respective committees and subscribe. Okay, so any questions on that? Okay, so, yes, go ahead.
What committees would you recommend us looking at?
Okay, so most of the bills that are going to be dealing with the governor's orders, the emergency declaration and the powers of the governor, and that's a commitment from both bodies of the legislature. Those bills will all be going most likely going through State Affairs Committee of both chambers. So you can focus on that. Oh, that's great. Representative Giddings is here just in time. So we asked Representative Giddings to be here today as a member of the House and also as a member of the JFAC committee, which JFAC is Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee. Last week, when we were discussing the two different bills, the two different resolutions to end the emergency order, there's a difference of opinion between the House and the Senate of how to do that. And the Senate, the way the Senate bill is written with concern about the funding that's available through the FEMA, which is Federal Emergency Management Association, or Assistance. And so today we thought we would present some information to you and give you a little more background on the funding issue so that you can understand, we can all understand what's, how to parse through what is relevant and what's not relevant there. So as a member of JFAC, and so I think the message that we want to convey to you is that there are a number of your elected officials who are doing the deep dive to make sure that we understand what is being said about the funding. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Representative Giddings to come forward, and thanks for being here today.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? See that? Okay. You can hear yourself on these. So let's dive into it. I think they said about 10 minutes. And first of all, just my thanks to the Lieutenant Governor and Representative Moon for taking the lead and just providing an opportunity to share with the public what's going on. Things happen in this building quickly, and we just had a big vote on the constitutional amendment. That's why we were running late, so my apologies for keeping you waiting. But let's jump into it. So I've been in the legislature 4 years. The last 4 years I've requested to serve on the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, and I was just finally selected to serve on it this year. So in the last 2 weeks, I've had a crash course on what I think we would call the most complicated budget in the history of our state. And I'm going to try to share with you a little bit of those insights. It will not be all-encompassing. Just this morning, we received a whole new, I'll call it a flood of information about the numbers. And so please feel free to ask questions. I know probably online you can ask questions as well. So we'll start off first. I'm going to talk about COVID money and then how that relates to funding, because that is there's lots of tentacles into the rest of policy making. And as you are all aware of, the decision on whether or not to end the emergency yesterday. So first of all, let's run through. So it's in the Idaho Constitution, Article 7, Section 13, where it talks about money and how it can be drawn from the Treasury. And it says, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in pursuance of appropriations made by law. So the spirit of that would have you believe that every single appropriations bill for our spending as a state gets passed by law, and that's how we can spend money. Unfortunately, the way the lawyers look at it is they say, okay, so anything that is in law about our funding is what they can do. So next slide, please. In our law, there is a section, Title 67, Chapter 35, where it says, and I tried to highlight it there, but I'm going to read it just for those of you who aren't able to see, where it says, funds available to any agency from sources other than state funds. So that means federal money that's coming in, and then I'm going to jump down, that it can I'll just keep reading. If not cognizable, so that's where you hear the word non-cog. So if we can't see it at the time, then at the time when the appropriations were made, whether state fiscal liability is increased or not, must have prior approval of the administrator of the Division of Financial Management and the Board of Examiners in order that funds may be expended. So the Board of Examiners wrote a letter and said, we absolve our anything in this process. So they're not in the process. So you back up one more. So you have the administrator of the Division of Financial Management, which we call DFM. So that individual gets to appropriate all of the federal money that's coming in when the legislature is not in session. So that is what has allowed them to legally spend the $1.25 billion that has come into our state so far. Just a quick summary. We, general funds as a state, we go through about $3.5 billion, and we get about $3 billion from the federal government every year. So that gives you an idea of how much the $1.25 billion is in relation to a regular budget. It's about a third of our general fund budget. This is legally how they're doing it. Some optimistic perspective, I guess. We do have some legislators who are working to change this so that this can't happen again in the future. So we are working on those. You should see those bills here in the next week or two. Let's jump to the next slide. So this information I'm pulling straight out of our legislative budget book. If you would like me to send you any of this, I'd be happy to show you how to get it, where to look it up. And I think this is just kind of a good visual so you can see how much money is coming into the state. So this specific one has to do with the CARES Act is what it's referenced as. So up at the top, it says total funds available. This is all the money that has come into the state of Idaho, $7.8 billion. So let me just remind you, what was our total budget as a state for a whole year? About $7 billion when we do the 3.5 general funds, 3 from federal funds. So we just brought in an entire year's worth of funds during this past year. And that number is still growing. So if you look at the Peterson Foundation, they're referencing closer to 8.1 billion. So right now we're at about 8 billion. The blue piece of pie on the bottom left, because the money that's come in has come into a lot of different, some of the agencies, rental assistance, Department of Labor, Department of Health and Welfare for personal protection equipment. The blue piece of the pie is what came to the state and that the state was allowed to distribute it. So normally, the legislature would appropriate that money. But because of that non-COG statute, the director of DFM now got that authority. And so with the governor's, dictates, that's how they created a CFAC committee. So we have, and that's where they got to appropriate the $1.25 billion. And you can hit the next slide. Yes, ma'am.
Is the DFM an elected position?
No, ma'am. Nothing in the executive branch is elected, except for the governor, I guess. So here's the CFAC versus JFAC. Yes, sir. Another question. The individual that we're working with, we could pull up their org chart, but Alex Adams is probably a popular name that you have heard. And he also, I think chaired is the proper word, chaired the CFAC committee. So instead of appropriations going through the JFAC legislature, now all these appropriations are going through CFAC. And Mr. Adams was at the head of that committee. And then they further split the money, and they made decisions on where the money should go. They allowed the lieutenant governor to sit in on the committee. But you can read more about their issues. There's a website and all their committee minutes and what they voted on. Let's go ahead and hit the next slide. Now this is the supplemental. So just at the end, right before the president, at the end of the year, last year, President Trump signed an additional supplemental. So this one, well actually, and it went through Congress, but this one provided $911 billion to the whole United States again. Just this morning, I got the number on how much of that potentially is going to be used in Idaho, but I haven't had time to update the slide. So I'm still crunching those numbers. But inside here, you can see all the other areas where this money is going, the unemployment assistance, education, and different broadband development. And this is the money where we're going to see a lot more discussion publicly, because now the legislature's in session. And so a handful of these spending requests are now going to come through JFAC committee. Our first one that we'll vote on will be tomorrow, on whether or not we should approve some rental assistance for people in Ada County. Next slide. Sorry, yes, ma'am.
Not the two previous slides, where you have the CFAC versus JFAC. Is there a I may have missed it, but is there a comparison about how the CFAC compares to the JFAC, or was that just representative of what CFAC is doing? It would be nice to have, see how the difference is, otherwise I don't know how they're different.
That's probably just my fault for displaying it that way. That it's really not a funding difference. So JFAC has not been allowed in any of this process. Tomorrow will be our first ever opportunity to jump into this budgeting process. So there's really no verses. I kind of put it up there, not essentially trying to be cute. In here you have an elected body versus the executive body deciding what to do with money that doesn't exist.
And would it have, do you feel it would look at these budgets or the spending money differently? How would JFAC, do you feel, would have done things differently, or would there been a different outcome? That's what I'm trying to understand. What are your thoughts on?
That's good. I think, yeah, we can maybe get into the opinion of looking at who specifically was chosen to serve on the CFAC committees. A lot of bureaucrats who weren't raised in Riggins, Idaho. And now you do bring up a good point. The JFAC committee is the most progressive committee in this building. They never allow conservatives in that committee. This year is a first, and now there's 2 of us, and with a few extra helpers. But I mean, when you're trying to vote on something, 2, 3, 4, we're not going to win. But at least we can speak up for what the people want. And that's why I really try to engage. If you don't get my newsletter, please shoot me an email. I try to include all the numbers and what I'm seeing kind of real time as they come through the Finance Committee. I sent out just a request. Have I gone over my time, ma'am?
No.
Okay.
I wanted to help
Oh,
answer that
the
question.
CFAC question? Great.
As a member of the committee.
Great. I guess let me finish this thought, though. One example would be I've asked people for their input, like this vote we're going to have tomorrow on emergency rental relief. And I'm still getting details, but what have we been told so far is that only people who live in Ada County in the city of Boise are eligible for potential rental relief. And they're quoting $158 million available. Last year, I think only $16 million was actually used. So about that much. So let's say max $20 million that could help the people in Ada County. Well, that's, should we be just why are we only helping people who in areas that tend to vote differently than people in Riggins, right? And so how is JFAC going to vote on that? I could probably guess for you, but tomorrow is the big day. I think, there will probably be about 4 of us who vote no, and then the other 10 who vote yes, and that's the difference. But when it goes to the House floor, now it's game on. Because now we have a lot more conservatives, and now we can push back, and I hope that we can kill that budget. Because I don't want any more socialist money. Like, we want to stand up for ourselves and pay our own rent and just end the emergency and we can pay our rent, right? And so that's the difference, I think. Ma'am.
Thanks for allowing me to interject here. And just as a member of the CFAC committee, I think the question was specific to why going through CFAC and not a legislative committee. And the best way I can think of to answer that question is because many of these budgetary requests are policy-related funding requests. And so that's why when it's policy, when we're dealing with policy, it really should be going through the legislative process where a person can present a bill, a proposal, and you can hear testimony from the public and they can debate and weigh. And I think that's the best way I can think of to answer that specific question. So thanks for the interruption, and you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I'll go faster and funnier, I think, because there's other people that need to present. But so this slide, and this is that Peterson Foundation that the governor is using their numbers from that shows that 8.1 billion total so far into our state. Now let's get into FEMA, because there's been some controversy over FEMA money. So Peterson Foundation has said that 52 million has come into Idaho. Next slide. So we started coordinating, talking with the director of the Idaho Office of Emergency Management. And this I received last week. It is an eye chart, and I'm sorry. I mean, no, I'll send you the spreadsheet if you'd like to see it. But the point that I want to make is I asked, okay, how much, and actually this one, I think this is the one the lieutenant governor had asked for. How much money has the state received from FEMA this last year? So March to December of 2020. And the bottom line is you can see at the bottom, so the big numbers, the project amounts is 72 million, but the federal share, because there's a couple off numbers there. One of them is lost wages, and that's a huge number that skewed it. That was 47 million. I don't think that should be on there. But the actual federal share, so we got 18 million last year for just FEMA funds. Next slide. So then my question was, well, if we ended the emergency tomorrow, how much FEMA money would we potentially lose? This is a tricky question. We have not gotten a straight answer on it. So I'm going to try to explain to you what I know as of now, and it could change in 30 minutes. But as of now, we have these projects that are open. I've asked for a detailed explanation of what each project is. I have not received that yet, but I'm sure I will get it. So when it just says for the university, well, what does that mean? And so you can see these are open, and potentially that we have not, these are pending of getting FEMA money back. And you'd see that federal share would be 15 million. And then you bring in the National Guard. So the National Guard is kind of its own situation. The governor called up 250 guardsmen. They are paid between $500 and $550 a day per guard member. So just 2 days ago, he extended his authority and increased it to 400 members. So when I got the spreadsheet, the guard total federal share was 11 million, but as of when he updated it, now you're going to jump up another 14 million, just because the per day, 550, 500 per member per day, and they've fragged it out till March, the end of March. So that's, if we were to end the emergency tomorrow, your guards members would get to go home, and that would be great. Then there was one other portion, next slide please, of what they sent me is that if we ended the disaster tomorrow, it would shut down our emergency operations center. And that's what these numbers are. And the federal government pays for a small portion of that emergency operations center. And so far, the number on there, 183,000. Not really sure if that is how much we've gotten, because if you look on there, it says cost to date, but if we shut it down, there would be no more expenses. And so we would and if that were to cost us 18 million for an expenses that we hadn't paid, then so be it. We're being told we have a $500 million surplus. And then we jump into the FEMA documents. I'm pulling in contracts now. So I don't think, FEMA money really shouldn't be dependent on a state emergency. It's dependent on that federal emergency. But it may close the accounts where we receive this money. And I'm waiting to get that document to know for sure. So this is all a what if. So it may be that closing the emergency tomorrow would not cost us anything in FEMA, but maybe we've already obligated some of it and it would close that bank account. And so we might lose between 15 and $20 million, and we're still flushing that out. So yes, ma'am.
So quick question on that. What is the interest that we're going to have to pay back on this money?
I did not see that anywhere in the FEMA contract, or I don't know, there's no payback really with this money. These aren't loans. Some of them are small business loans back in the CARES money, and each contract is a little bit different depending on the program. But when it comes to FEMA money, I'm not aware of an interest payment. It would depend, but I can try to look into that for you.
I would highly suggest it, being from my background, I worked FEMA.
Well, let's talk.
What is the payback?
I'm not aware of it. Like it depends on the project, and is it a grant? Is it a loan? But with some of this FEMA, I'm not aware of that. So, but yeah, definitely. Any other questions? Thank you. Yes, sir.
I do have a question. So how do you get the money and detach the strings? So like the Central District Health, it's these White House profiles that are the targets that they have to meet that say things like group sizes and, all these different, requirements that are the strings that come with the money. How can the legislature work that you could take the money and not put the oppressive strings that are pressing down upon people?
I don't think you can take fake money and not have strings attached. I haven't had the opportunity to look at all these contracts. We've only been in session a week and a half, and I have been working 12-hour days. Don't get to see my 1-year-old and 2-year-old when I wake up in the morning and kiss them goodnight when I go to bed, just trying to figure it out. This is the most complex budget we've ever seen. We are only getting about 50% transparency, and the people that we're asking that information from, they're swamped. They're not answering our questions very quickly because they're swamped, and I get that and I respect that, but there's no transparency. We're out of control, and mind you, the legislature doesn't have staff, but you have 250 agencies who have staff based on your taxes, and that's, so we're outnumbered, we're outrun, and I'm throwing everything I in just trying to figure it out. So, but if you have questions, I'd love to be a source for you to try to pull information out of agencies, and that's why I appreciate what the Lieutenant Governor is doing in trying to provide clarity on what's going on in the Capitol.
Can I just ask one last question?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go to the second slide? It was the COG slide.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that there was a committee that's put together. I don't know the exact verbiage, some sort of committee.
The CFAC committee?
I don't know. On this, you said that the committee washed their hands. They're like, we don't want to be a part of this.
Oh, the Board of Examiners?
Why did that happen?
I don't have a good answer for you on that, but I can follow up if you'd like. Yeah. Yes.
On that slide up there, it goes back, you had the education at some big number. Is that broken down? Personally, I'm a little bit concerned with the social justice curriculum at Boise State University and Idaho University and blah-de-blah. I wanted to fund that. How do I get that number to say we should not approve this amount for social justice programs, communist programs within the school system?
We're digging into it, and I will get you that number in my newsletter, too. Okay. That's your one.
Thank you so much.
I can take yours afterwards, okay? Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
We have one more legislator that we want to hear from, and just that issue in itself, we could probably have a whole session on that. Before I turn the time over to Representative Ehardt, she's here to present a bill on limitations of gatherings and parents being able to attend sports events. What I wanted to bring to your attention on the issue of the FEMA funding And a citizen actually gave me this report, and it is the FEMA, the state agreement between the state of Idaho and the federal government, which it was confirmed to me today that this is a different type of agreement than what is typical when we have a natural disaster such as a flood or a storm or whatever. And this was an agreement that was put out by President Trump under the prior administration. And there are some things written into this agreement that are of concern to me. I'm weighing through this report, and I'm still waiting for some answers. But to answer your question about this issue of federal overreach into our state, it's through these types of agreements and funding proposals that this happens. Now, my concern is that now we have a new administration that is going to be administering and enforcing certain laws and regulations when we sign on to these kinds of agreements. And so, as your elected official, all of us we swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States, and we swear an oath to the Constitution of the state of Idaho. We do not swear an oath to federal laws and regulations. And so as your Lieutenant Governor, and it is so important right now that all of us hold our elected officials accountable, that to make sure that we are defending the sovereignty of our state, and we are not allowing these inclusive regulations to be enforced in our state of Idaho. So I'm waiting to get some more information on this, and I've expressed a concern to some of my friends in the legislature, and so I will be able to report back to you on some things that I find out here. So with that, then I would like to turn the time over to Representative Ehardt, and she will present to you a bill that has passed out of the committee and waiting on a floor vote. Is that correct? Representative Ehardt, welcome.
Awesome, thanks. Excellent, excellent, thank you. Let me just say something first in regards to Representative Giddings. I know that sometimes it can feel overwhelmingly difficult when you feel like you're just one of a couple people on a large committee. That was my experience when I served on the city council. I was essentially a 1 in 5 vote a lot of the times. And one thing I learned, though, is just by having that one voice was able to actually stave things off that would have gone forward had that voice not been there, and that voice to report to the people. So those voices are incredibly important, and it will make a difference on the floor. So as you may know, I'm one of the co-author sponsors of HCR 2. I want to make clear first that this bill, though it also addresses sporting events, knowing those of you who may know my background, I do not get involved in these things strictly because it has to do with sports. That's not the case at all. But, you know, this bill has to do with doing away with the limitations on the number of people that can gather. It certainly affects sports and activities. So let me take it from that direction for just a moment. And that is that probably this entire summer, from the time our session ended, it seemed that I was involved in some really hard-fought battles, at least in our district in Idaho Falls, in regards to our kids. It's funny that so many of those involved in the educational agencies, the lobbyists that call themselves the stakeholders, say that they're in it for the kids, and when it comes time to work on behalf of our kids, I don't see them there. And you know, it seems like we've already had this conflict with myself and the Idaho Education Association, so I'll say it right now as I've been saying it, they are not there working on behalf of the kids, and they've gone after me, and by gosh, I want to hold them accountable too. So one of the things that HCR 2 does is the emergency power resolutions and bills legislation going forward would eventually take care of this, but there's that negotiation that's going on with both sides. We wanted to take just a small portion and do it as quickly as possible so that whether it's businesses that need the ability to have more than 10 in a gathering, or whether it's you making those decisions for you and your family to go and watch a sport, and not just sporting, it could be activities, it could be the band playing at the sporting event. They practice to be able to do these things. One thing that I said throughout my campaign is that it's these activities, the band and the sports, this is what brings joy, value, and meaning to the lives of our kids. And it brings that same thing to the parents and the families to be able to go and support their children. I know with me and my family that some of the fondest memories I had, our time was invested in family activities involving my brother's sports in particular, where we traveled, where we were there together. This is important, and the government should never be able to dictate to a family how a family decides to enjoy family time. And so this legislation has moved quickly. We did not vote on it today. There's been a little bit of concern from maybe the Senate leadership that the Senate support isn't there, and I believe the Senate support is there. So we said, all right, then we will work to gather the names of those senators who are supporting this so that you can see that there is Senate support. And the plan is, I was hoping tomorrow, but it looks like the plan is to hear it on Monday. And so we are having those discussions with the senators right now. And to this point, the senators appear to be on board, but I can encourage you and would encourage you to please, both with our side and with the senators, don't stop. I'm assuming that you are many of the people from whom we've been receiving these emails and these social messages. I know in my district, in Idaho Falls, I have never dealt with so many parents in tears. I've been dealing with the parents and constituents, but they have been in tears over these orders. It's ruining their lives. And you know, I don't have to repeat what it's doing to our kids. To see our kids going through anxiety and depression. And many people were thinking that these things had to do, because it's kind of all together, this idea that they can't be in school and then they can't be in school and we have to limit then they are in school, but they can't be there watching their friends with whom they've just been in school all day. And yet they're with they're with the parents at home, but their parents can't be there at the gym watching them. And then you take pictures of the gym and the gyms are empty. And it goes beyond the gym. I happen to be from, again, Idaho Falls, and we had Skyline High School playing in the state championship. I'm not making this about sports. I'm making it about a point. We had the state championship, and the stadium's empty. And the parents are outside the fence, all clustered together, trying to watch their kids, all like this, when they could have been spread throughout the stadium. These things, see, this is the part that even our kids understand, that just give us a logical reason why. There's no logic behind this. It almost seems at times that some of this is punitive, and then I walk into Walmart. Okay, enough said, right? So that's all the parents. We are representing you and trying to do those things that make sense for our families, and that's what this legislation is doing. So we will continue to gather support from our senators, and with your help, make sure that support is there. And one thing I would also like to say, me personally, I'm not making this about the governor. I'm making this about the executive orders that include the health department, because this actually is coming through the health department, and this needs to stop. And if he wants to make it personal, that's fine. I'm making it about you and our family. So I'm probably repeating myself and can do just as well to stop. I don't know if you want me to take a few questions. If there are, is that all right? All right, please.
So why are they, the House side, why are they not, what's the reason for them to not pass this bill? What's the reason?
Yes, I believe that we will, but the thought was it didn't want it to seem like somehow it was throwing shots across the bow, and I believe maybe they thought that there wasn't also the support on the Senate side. I also think that they were taken a little back by how quickly it moved. How it just, this is supported, and I believe that if we had heard it today, my personal opinion is there would have been a ton of members from the House standing to speak passionately to it and about the stories, and maybe that seemed a little overwhelming, but I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure it goes forward for our kids. If they want to see Senate support, I think we're all, we've got myself, Representative Crane, Representative Furness, and others talking with our senators right now saying, this is important. It's not a personal attack. It's for our parents and our kids. It's for our communities whose businesses have been shut down. Now, keep in mind, just because of how some of the authority is worded, in rolling this back, there are still some other powers at play that this wouldn't necessarily effect. And this is, you know, as Representative Giddings had talked about, I personally would never want to be on JFAC. I would just get lost in the numbers. But there's so much like that. It's like a wicked web that's been weaved, and trying to, you know, just, I mean, we've just got to start somewhere. If it means that we start with this piece of legislation that takes care of this, and then we realize we have to bring another piece, we have some other legislation coming forward having to do with health districts and all. So it's kind of a Stephen Covey, line upon line, first things first. We're trying.
I know you're a big supporter of not having transgender in boys and girls sports, and I'm
Kind of like brought the legislation forward, but.
well, I really appreciate that, because that's a pretty hot topic, and I'm really having a hard time listening to the news with the new administration, the federal administration. And I did hear that they will cut funding to schools that don't, well, if they have schools that have federal dollars behind them, they are required to allow transgender boys in girls' sports. And the FEMA, is that completely different? I mean.
I think that's different. And so she's just asking about H500, Fairness in Women's Sports Act. Right now, as some of you may have heard, I had testified in Montana in regards to their bill going forward. I do not believe that this will, I don't believe the other states, we have 15 states committed to bringing this sort of legislation forward. I believe that they will still go forward. I think what we're counting on, their injunction was, you know, kind of stayed in Idaho. What we're counting on is to create enough other district courts, you know, like the Ninth Circuit and other circuits having to hear this. Much like the abortion, think of the abortion issue. It was legislation, and it's still playing out in every state. That is essentially the way we're looking at it. I believe you're going to see other states continue to bring it forward. I was on a Zoom conference last night with another legislator bringing it forward in Utah, and continue to be on. It's, you know, we have, obviously, it's kind of like sports. You're in the middle, you're running your game plan, all of a sudden the other team switches and you have to adjust, but it doesn't mean you stop playing. And that's the approach that we're taking. I've been all summer long since this started, we have a huge coalition that includes Alliance Defending Freedom, Wolf, the Radical Women Feminists, Heritage Foundation, Concerned Women. We have a lot on this coalition that are working on this nationally. So we are working on this. Yes.
I'm terribly sorry, but I didn't catch your name.
You mean you don't recognize? No, I'm kidding. After all that last year, I'm Representative Barbara Ehardt.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay,
Great.
excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ehardt, great job. One thing I want to add, because I was in the committee when HCR 2 was just now postponed until Monday, and I think some of you might have heard on the radio that the governor is actually considering having a discussion with the State Board of Education to increase the numbers. So again, I think the fact that this was moving through rapidly precipitates a move with a discussion with the State Board of Education. Also the fact that many of you have called on this piece of legislation. And if you're calling on this piece of legislation, keep it up, because this is a good bill. And as Representative Ehardt said, we definitely need to get folks back into events and make life worthwhile. Yes, ma'am.
Well, if the concurrent resolution was passed to end the emergency, would we need all this legislation?
Well, as far as would we need more legislation, I think we just need to firm up, because who's to say another emergency order couldn't be enacted? So let's just get the rules, let's get the laws, let's get our amendment, let's get everything that we need to make sure that we don't go through what we have already for this past 11 months. Okay? And so anyway, I do want to say that in regard to Representative Ehardt's bill in response to the House Resolution 64, input is paramount, and a lot of you in this audience are doing a great job. But you've got to get your friends and your family to do a good job of reaching out, and we're expanding that daily. So if you need to go to Barbara Ehardt's, look her up on the legislature, click on her and add your name to her, subscribe to her email list, do it. Same with me. Same with Representative Priscilla Giddings. If you like what you hear, do that. And if you're interested in education, Common Core, where is it at? How come we haven't totally got rid of it yet? Lincoln to the education agenda. And we're going to keep fighting, because if you haven't noticed, those kind of fights take a lot of time. So Lieutenant Governor, do you want to close this out, and we'll talk about next week's agenda, because there's going to be a lot more stuff for next week.
Well, what a great job, Representative Moon, Representative Giddings, and Representative Ehardt. Don't you love the passion there? Yes. And I met two of the young men that came over from Idaho Falls. They're both involved in the student body government at Hillcrest High School. Very impressive young men. And they testified in front of the committee. And what a great experience for the young people to feel like they can make a difference, they can get involved. They're helping to move this bill through. So thank you for being here today. We're wrapping it up on time. Thanks again for being here, and we will continue this next week, next Thursday, same time, same place. We might have to adjust according to accommodate the legislature as they start debating bills, but if we do change the time, we'll be sure to let you know in advance. So thanks again for everyone for being here, and I'll stick around if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer. Thanks for being here, making a difference. Good.